At first, it looked like one of those strange internet stories that people laugh about for a few minutes before scrolling on. A quiet neighborhood in North Raleigh, North Carolina, woke to whispers of something impossible. Residents spotted a venomous snake slithering through yards, disappearing beneath bushes and fences while terrified families rushed their children indoors. Police officers responding to the calls expected to find an ordinary escaped pet. Instead, they found themselves hunting one of the world's most dangerous reptiles, a spitting zebra cobra capable of spraying venom directly into a person's eyes. What seemed like an unusual animal control call quickly transformed into a public safety emergency that left an entire community on edge, wondering where the deadly predator would strike next. As officers searched the surrounding streets, every passing hour increased the fear. Parents refused to let their children play outside. Joggers abandoned their usual routes, and neighbors nervously checked beneath porches before opening their doors. The cobra had vanished without leaving a trace, and nobody knew whether it was hiding beneath a parked car or curled inside someone's garden. But the greatest shock wasn't the missing snake itself. The real nightmare was waiting behind the front door of the man believed to own it. Investigators had no idea they were about to uncover a private collection so disturbing that even seasoned officers would struggle to believe what they were seeing. The address belonged to 21-year-old Christopher Gifford, a young man whose fascination with exotic reptiles had quietly grown into an obsession. From the outside, the family home appeared perfectly ordinary, blending into the peaceful suburban neighborhood like every other house on the street. Nothing about the property suggested it concealed dozens of creatures capable of killing within minutes. But as investigators entered the basement, they stepped into a world few people ever experience. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with cages containing snakes from around the globe, many carrying venom powerful enough to cause devastating injuries or death if handled incorrectly. The officers carefully counted nearly 75 snakes living inside the cramped basement. Cobras, vipers, and other dangerous species rested inside containers that investigators soon realized were far from secure. Some enclosures were improperly locked, while others carried incorrect labels that could easily lead to catastrophic mistakes during an emergency. Every discovery raised another alarming question. If one deadly cobra had already escaped unnoticed, how many others could do the same? What had begun as the search for a single missing snake was becoming a frightening investigation into years of reckless decisions that had placed an entire neighborhood in danger, without anyone realizing it. As wildlife experts examined the collection, an even more unsettling truth surfaced. The escaped zebra cobra hadn't disappeared days earlier. It had reportedly escaped months before. Authorities learned that the snake had been missing since the previous year, yet no official report had ever been filed. For nearly 12 months, one of the world's most venomous snakes had potentially been roaming outside while nearby families remained completely unaware of the danger surrounding them. Every birthday party held in a backyard, every child playing in the grass, every evening walk through the neighborhood had unknowingly taken place beneath the shadow of an invisible threat. The revelation sparked outrage throughout the community. Residents demanded answers, struggling to understand how someone could knowingly allow such a terrifying secret to remain hidden. Emergency responders realized they had been denied the opportunity to warn the public or organize a proper search months earlier. Instead, they had been forced into a desperate race against time. Only after frightened neighbors spotted the cobra themselves, trust quickly turned into anger, and many wondered whether this disaster could have been entirely prevented if responsibility had come before obsession. For 2 tense days, trained specialists searched relentlessly through wooded areas, drainage systems, gardens, and abandoned spaces where the cobra might have hidden. Every movement in the grass drew attention. Every rustling leaf raised anxiety. News crews reported constantly from the neighborhood, while social media filled with rumors, speculation, and fear. Some claimed they had seen the snake in different locations, sending officers rushing across the area only to find false alarms. The uncertainty became almost as exhausting as the search itself. Nobody could relax until the cobra was safely contained. Finally, after an intensive operation, wildlife specialists located the elusive snake and captured it without anyone being injured. Relief swept through the neighborhood almost instantly. But that relief quickly gave way to disbelief as investigators reviewed everything they had uncovered inside Gifford's home. The escaped cobra had been only one piece of a much larger problem. Authorities concluded that the danger had never been limited to a single animal. It had been growing quietly for years inside a suburban basement, hidden behind locked doors while an unsuspecting community carried on with everyday life. Following the investigation, Christopher Gifford faced dozens of misdemeanor charges connected to the improper housing of his reptiles, incorrect labeling of dangerous animals, and his failure to report the cobra's escape. While owning exotic snakes wasn't illegal under state law, the responsibility that came with keeping such deadly creatures had been ignored. Investigators argued that safety rules existed for a reason, not to punish collectors, but to protect innocent people from preventable tragedies. In this case, the difference between an unusual news story and a fatal disaster had come down to luck. The case left behind an uncomfortable question that still lingers, long after the headlines faded. How far can personal passion go before it becomes public danger? Christopher Gifford may have seen himself as a dedicated reptile enthusiast, but for one North Carolina neighborhood, his obsession nearly turned into a nightmare that could have ended in unimaginable loss. Sometimes the most frightening true crime stories aren't driven by greed or revenge. Sometimes they're born from carelessness, hidden in plain sight, waiting for one mistake to unleash consequences no one can control. When investigators finally finished documenting the evidence, they realized this case had become far more than a story about an escaped snake. It was a lesson in how quickly fascination can blur the line between responsibility and recklessness. Every improperly secured enclosure represented another opportunity for disaster, and every mislabeled container increased the risk for firefighters, paramedics, or police officers who might one day be forced to respond to an emergency inside that house. Had a fire broken out or a medical emergency occurred, first responders could have unknowingly walked into a room filled with some of the world's deadliest reptiles. What had been hidden beneath the surface of an ordinary family home had the potential to place countless lives in danger. For the neighbors, the emotional impact lingered long after the cobra had been captured. Parents who once allowed their children to ride bicycles through the neighborhood now found themselves looking twice before stepping into their own backyards. Conversations at community meetings revolved around safety, accountability, and whether authorities should tighten regulations surrounding dangerous exotic animals. The fear had disappeared, but the trust had not. People no longer saw their quiet neighborhood the same way. They had learned that sometimes the greatest threats aren't announced with warning signs, they remain hidden behind familiar doors until chance finally exposes them. As court proceedings moved forward, Christopher Gifford found himself facing dozens of misdemeanor charges tied to the conditions in which the reptiles had been kept. Investigators emphasized that owning venomous snakes was not, by itself, against North Carolina law. The crime, they argued, was the repeated failure to follow the basic safety measures designed to protect both the owner and the public. Proper enclosures, accurate labeling, and immediate reporting of escaped animals weren't minor technicalities. They were safeguards created because one mistake involving a venomous reptile could cost someone their eyesight or their life. Public opinion quickly divided into two camps. Some viewed Gifford as a passionate collector whose poor judgment spiraled beyond his control. Others believed his actions demonstrated a shocking disregard for human safety and that luck alone prevented a tragedy. Experts within the reptile community also spoke out, explaining that responsible keepers dedicate enormous effort to secure housing and emergency planning because they understand exactly what is at stake. To them, this incident wasn't simply unfortunate, damaged the reputation of every responsible exotic animal owner who followed the rules. The story spread far beyond North Carolina, making headlines across the country and sparking debates about the ownership of dangerous wildlife. News broadcasts replayed images of the captured zebra cobra, while viewers questioned how someone could accumulate such a large collection without attracting greater oversight. Social media exploded with opinions, jokes, and criticism, but beneath the humor remained a serious reality. If the snake had bitten a child, a pet, or an unsuspecting neighbor, this story would not have ended as an unusual headline. It would have become a heartbreaking criminal investigation centered on preventable loss. Wildlife professionals later pointed out that venomous snakes are not evil creatures. They behave according to instinct, neither seeking revenge nor deliberately attacking people. The real danger emerges when humans underestimate the responsibility that comes with keeping them. The cobra had simply done what any frightened wild animal would do. After escaping confinement, it tried to survive. In many ways, the animal itself became an unwilling participant in a crisis created entirely by human choices. Looking back, investigators agreed that several fortunate circumstances prevented the situation from becoming catastrophic. The cobra was eventually spotted before anyone suffered a serious injury. Experienced wildlife experts were available to safely recover the snake, and emergency responders avoided direct contact with the improperly housed reptiles inside the basement. Remove any one of those fortunate events, and the outcome might have been written very differently. Cases like this often remind investigators that public safety depends not only on laws, but on individual responsibility, long before police are ever called. For Christopher Gifford, the consequences extended far beyond the courtroom. His name became permanently associated with one of the most bizarre and alarming exotic animal cases in recent memory. What may have begun as a fascination with rare reptiles ended with criminal charges, national media attention, and a community that would remember the fear long after the legal process concluded. Obsession has a way of growing quietly, convincing people that every new risk is manageable until reality proves otherwise. True crime often brings to mind calculated murders, elaborate robberies, or violent conspiracies. Yet some of the most unsettling cases begin with something far more ordinary. One person's refusal to recognize that their actions affect everyone around them. This wasn't a story driven by hatred or revenge. It was a story about negligence, misplaced confidence, and the terrifying consequences of believing that dangerous situations can always remain under control. The escaped zebra cobra became a symbol of how quickly private decisions can become public emergencies when responsibility is ignored. As the neighborhood slowly returned to normal, one question continued to echo through the community. What if the snake had never been seen? What if it had disappeared forever, silently sharing the same streets, parks, and backyards with families who had no idea it was there? Those unanswered questions are what make this case so haunting. Sometimes the most chilling true crime stories aren't remembered because of what happened, but because of how close they came to becoming something far worse. And in North Raleigh, that frightening possibility is something many residents will never completely forget.